They say the deepest betrayals don't come from your enemies. The cuts that never truly heal, the ones that scar the soul, are delivered by the very hands you once held. I'm Arthur Miller. I'm 72 years old. I spent 50 years of my life building things with these hands: houses, furniture, a family. I thought I had built a legacy, but one phone call, just 27 words, taught me that some things aren't built to last. They're designed to be demolished from the inside out. And what I learned next? Well, it taught me that karma isn't a concept. It's a blueprint, and sometimes you have to build it yourself. The scent of cedar and sawdust has been the perfume of my life. Even now, retired and with joints that creak more than the old floorboards in my workshop, I find my peace here. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of lazy, sun-drenched day that reminds you of everything good in the world. I was putting the finishing touches on a rocking horse, a gift for a future that felt as solid and real as the block of oak I was carving. A grandchild, my Emily's child someday, my daughter Emily. She was the spitting image of her mother, Clara. Same fiery auburn hair, same constellation of freckles across her nose, same laugh that could make you forget a lifetime of troubles. After Clara passed from cancer 10 years ago, Emily became my entire world. Every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every triumph. I was there. I worked double shifts at the construction site for years, hands raw and back aching, just to make sure she could go to the college of her dreams without a penny of debt. I poured everything I was, everything I had into that girl, and she'd found love, or so I thought. Julian Vance, he was polished, a financial advisor with a portfolio of expensive suits and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He came from money, the kind that whispers instead of shouts. His parents, Richard and Eleanor Vance, were the type to inspect a wine glass for smudges before taking a sip, even in my humble home. They called me Mr. Miller, never Arthur, with a tone that suggested they were being generous. They found my life's work, building honest, sturdy things with my own two hands, to be a quaint little hobby. Still, for Emily's sake, I tried. I swallowed their condescension and welcomed Julian into our lives. When they got engaged, I was overjoyed for her. We started planning the wedding immediately. This was my moment, my final grand gift to my daughter. For 30 years, I'd maintained a special account, the wedding fund. Every spare dollar, every bit of overtime went into it. It had grown to a substantial amount, just over $100,000. It was everything I had. I wanted her to have the fairy tale. The big white church Clara and I were married in, the reception at the old botanical gardens, an orchestra, a dress that would make angels weep. We'd spent months looking at venues, tasting cakes, arguing playfully over floral arrangements. Emily seemed ecstatic, her eyes sparkling with dreams. 2 weeks ago, Julian had called a meeting, just him, his parents, and me. Emily was conveniently away on a work retreat. They sat in my living room, the one I built myself, on the couch I'd bought with Clara, and laid out a new plan. "Arthur," Richard Vance began, steepling his fingers, "we've been thinking, this large public affair you're envisioning, it's a bit dated, a bit provincial." Eleanor chimed in, her voice smooth as venom. "Our circle is more accustomed to subtlety, an intimate destination event, perhaps Lake Como. We've decided to handle the arrangements. It's for the best." They wanted to take over. My plans, my dream for my daughter, were being dismissed as tacky, but the real sting was in the next part. "And about the fund you've so diligently saved," Julian said, that slick smile plastered on his face. "It would be a great help if you could transfer it to us. We'll need to make deposits, secure the villa. It's just easier to manage it from one central account." I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. This wasn't about taste. It was about control. It was about money, my money. "The fund is for Emily's wedding," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "I'll pay the vendors directly as we planned." A flicker of annoyance crossed Julian's face. "Arthur, let's not be difficult. We're talking about a significant logistical operation. Liquid assets are required. It's my wedding too, and my family is contributing substantially more. We feel we should direct the funds." The argument went on for an hour. They were relentless, a pack of polite wolves circling a tired old bear. They made me feel small, old, and out of touch. In the end, I stood my ground. The money would stay where it was until invoices were produced for vendors I had approved. They left in a huff, their car whispering away down the gravel drive, leaving a cloud of dust and indignation in its wake. I called Emily the moment they were gone. She sounded distant, flustered. "Dad, they're just trying to help. Julian knows about these things. It's all so stressful. Please just try to get along with them." She didn't defend me. She didn't defend our plans. She just wanted it to be easy. That hurt more than anything the Vances had said. That was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks of silence. My calls to Emily went to voicemail. My texts were met with short, evasive replies. Busy with work. Pre-wedding madness. TTYL. I chalked it up to a bride's stress and the Vances whispering poison in her ear. I decided to give her space, but the silence was gnawing at me. So on that beautiful Tuesday afternoon, I wiped the sawdust from my hands, took a deep breath, and decided to drive over to the sleek, minimalist apartment I was still helping to pay for. I'd call first to be polite. I dialed Julian's number as Emily wasn't answering. He picked up on the second ring. "Arthur," he said, his tone clipped, impatient. "Julian, hi. Sorry to bother you. I haven't heard much from Emily, and I'm getting a little worried. I was thinking of stopping by. Also, I wanted to ask about the wedding planning. When are we all getting together to finalize the details for the church?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, a strange, cold silence. I could hear a faint clinking sound, like ice in a glass, and a woman's laugh in the background. It sounded like Eleanor. Then came the 27 words that brought the house I'd built around my heart crashing down. "Oh, that won't be necessary, Arthur," Julian said, his voice dripping with a casual, dismissive cruelty. "You don't have to worry about a thing. Emily and I got married yesterday." The phone felt impossibly heavy in my hand, then slick with sweat. For a moment, the world dissolved into a meaningless buzz, the scent of cedar turning sharp and acrid in my nostrils. The rocking horse on my workbench seemed to mock me, a monument to a future that had just been stolen. What did you say?" I stammered, my voice a dry rasp. "We got married," he repeated, and I could practically hear the smirk in his voice. "It was a small, private ceremony at the courthouse, just us and my parents. We're celebrating at their place now. Emily's right here." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A private ceremony. His parents, not me. Her father. The man who taught her to ride a bike, who held her while she wept over her first broken heart, who promised her mother on her deathbed that I would walk our daughter down the aisle. "Put her on the phone," I demanded, my voice cracking with a pain so profound it felt physical. "She's a little busy, Arthur," he said dismissively. "We're in the middle of a champagne toast." "Put her on the goddamn phone, Julian," I roared, the sound foreign and raw coming from my own throat. There was a muffled exchange, then Emily's voice, small and timid, came on the line. "Dad? Em, what's going on? What did you do?" "Dad, please don't be mad," she whispered, and the weakness in her voice was like a knife in my gut. It was all just getting so complicated. The big wedding, the stress. Julian and his parents thought it would be better this way. Simpler, more elegant. Elegant? I choked back a sob. Elegant to get married without your own father? To throw away everything we planned, everything I've saved for without so much as a word? Was that elegant, Emily? "We were going to tell you," she said, her voice wavering. "We were going to have a party later. For everyone else." Everyone else. The words hung in the air between us. I wasn't family anymore. I was everyone else. I was an afterthought, a problem that had been neatly simplified. "Your mother," I started, my voice breaking. "I promised your mother." "Please don't bring Mom into this," she snapped, a flash of irritation in her tone that was pure Vance. "This is about me and Julian. It's our life." That was it, the final twist of the knife. I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down. I placed it gently back in its cradle, as if it were a fragile artifact from a forgotten civilization. My civilization. I don't remember the drive. It's a blur of red lights and angry horns that I didn't see or hear. My mind was a maelstrom of betrayal. I ended up outside their apartment building, the one with the sterile glass lobby and the doorman, who always looked right through me. I didn't go in. Instead, I drove to the Vance's monstrosity of a house in the wealthiest part of town, a cold white palace with more columns than a Greek ruin, and a lawn so perfect it looked like plastic. Julian's gleaming black Mercedes was in the driveway, alongside Richard's Jaguar. I parked my dusty Ford pickup behind them, a rusted relic in their pristine world. I walked up to the oversized front door and rang the bell, my hand steady despite the tremor in my soul. Eleanor Vance opened the door. She was dressed in a chic, cream-colored pantsuit, a champagne flute in her hand. Her face, a mask of polite surprise, tightened when she saw me. "Arthur," she said, her voice as crisp and cold as the wine she was drinking, "this is not a good time." "I'm here to see my daughter," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "As you heard, we're having a private family celebration," she replied, starting to close the door. I put my hand on the door, my calloused palm flat against the cold lacquered wood. It was the first time in my life I'd ever done something so aggressive, but I was no longer the man I was an hour ago. That man was dead. "Your family?" I said, the words tasting like ash. "My daughter's in there. I am her family. Now get out of my way." The shock on her face was almost satisfying. She stepped back, and I walked past her into the marble-floored foyer. Richard, Julian, and Emily were standing in a cavernous living room that looked like a furniture showroom. Emily was wearing a simple white dress. She looked pale and small. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Julian stepped forward, that smug grin back on his face. "I believe I told you she was busy, Arthur." "You went behind my back," I said, my gaze locked on him. "You manipulated my daughter, and you stole this moment from me. From her." "Stole?" Richard Vance scoffed, stepping beside his son. "Let's be clear. We streamlined a process that you were making unnecessarily sentimental and, frankly, quite vulgar. $100,000 wedding for a girl from your background? It's absurd. We did you a favor, saved you from embarrassing yourself." The contempt was no longer veiled. It was out in the open, raw and ugly. "That money was my life's work," I whispered, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a hollow emptiness. "It wasn't for you. It was for her. It was my gift." "And the gift is appreciated," Julian said smoothly, putting a proprietary arm around Emily's waist. She flinched. "We'll be putting it to good use. A down payment on a proper house in a proper neighborhood. An investment in our future." They weren't just taking over the wedding. They had always planned on taking the money. The wedding, my dream, was just an obstacle to them, a provincial hurdle to be cleared on their way to my life savings. I finally looked at Emily, my heart pleading with her to say something, to deny it, to wake up from this nightmare. "Em, is this what you want? A life bought with this kind of poison?" She looked at the floor, her hair falling over her face. "Dad, it's done," she mumbled. "Please, just go. Just go." 2 words from my daughter, the person I loved most in the world, and they were a command of banishment. I turned without another word and walked out. Eleanor Vance watched me go, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. As I got to my truck, my hands shaking so badly I could barely find my keys, I heard the pop of another champagne cork from inside the house, followed by their laughter. The drive home was different. It wasn't a blur. I saw everything with a terrible crystalline clarity. Every crack in the pavement, every face in every car. The world was exactly the same, but my place in it had been erased. I was a ghost, a walking wallet that had just been emptied. Back in my workshop, I looked at the rocking horse. Its smooth, curved lines felt like a lie. I picked up a heavy mallet from my workbench, my knuckles white, and with a guttural roar of pure, undiluted agony, I brought it down on the horse's head, shattering the wood, splintering my dreams into 1,000 pieces. The days that followed were a suffocating gray fog. I didn't leave the house. I didn't answer the phone. The workshop, once my sanctuary, was now a tomb filled with the ghosts of broken promises. The splintered remains of the rocking horse lay on the floor, an accusation I couldn't bear to look at or clean up. I sat in Clara's old armchair, the floral pattern worn smooth by time, and let the silence of the house swallow me whole. I received a single text from Emily. "Dad, I know you're upset, but this is for the best. Julian is transferring our finances to his management. He needs you to wire the wedding fund to his account. Here are the details." It was followed by an account number and a routing code. No apology, no remorse, just a demand. A bill for services rendered in raising the woman who had just disowned me. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, a cold, hard knot forming in my chest. It wasn't grief anymore. Grief is a soft, aching thing. This was different. This was cold, sharp, and heavy. It was the foundation for something else. One rainy afternoon, unable to stand the oppressive silence any longer, I went up to the attic. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just searching for a distraction, a way to outrun my own thoughts. The attic was Clara's domain, a meticulously organized library of our life together. Photo albums, boxes of Emily's school projects, old letters, and Clara's personal effects. I opened a trunk labeled Clara Personal. The scent of her faint floral perfume, trapped in the fabric of a silk scarf for 10 years, rose up and hit me with the force of a physical blow. I sank to the floorboards, the grief I'd been holding back finally breaking through in a wave of ragged, silent sobs. She would have never let this happen. She would have seen Julian for the snake he was in a heartbeat. My fingers brushed against a hard leather portfolio at the bottom of the trunk. It was one I hadn't seen in years. Stamped on the front in faded gold leaf were the words, "Gable and Croft, Attorneys at Law." Curiosity pierced through my haze of sorrow. I opened it. Inside was a thick stack of documents, financial statements, and a letter addressed to me in Clara's elegant, looping script. The envelope was sealed. My name was on the front. I'd forgotten all about this. Clara had given it to me a few months before she passed. "Don't open this unless you truly need to, Arthur," she'd said, her voice weak but firm. "It's a safety net, for you and for Emily, but it comes with rules." I'd put it away, lost in the fog of her illness, and never thought of it again. My hands trembling, I broke the seal. The letter inside was long, written over several days. She wrote of her love for me, of her fears for Emily growing up without a mother, and then she explained the contents of the portfolio. Clara, it turned out, had a secret she had kept from me, not out of malice, but out of a desire for a normal life. She came from old money, very old money. Her father was a ruthless tycoon who disapproved of her marrying a simple carpenter. He had cut her off when she chose me. We had lived our entire life on my modest salary, and I'd never known she had walked away from a fortune. But her grandfather, a kinder man, had secretly established a trust fund for her, one her father couldn't touch. Upon her death, that trust would pass to Emily. I stared at the documents. The numbers swam before my eyes. They were staggering, not thousands, millions. An 8-figure trust fund. My $100,000 wedding fund was a pittance, a drop in the ocean compared to this. My mind raced. Julian worked in finance. He was clever. Could he have known about this? Was his entire courtship of Emily a long con to get his hands on this fortune? It had to be. It explained everything. His tolerance of me, his sudden rush to marry, his desperation to control the finances. He probably thought my little wedding fund was the main inheritance, or perhaps the key to unlocking the rest. He didn't know the specifics, but he smelled the money. But then, as I continued reading Clara's letter, I came to the final page. I read the paragraph once, then twice, then a third time. The cold, hard knot in my chest began to burn. It was no longer a foundation for rage. It was the cornerstone of a fortress. Clara, wise and prescient, even as she faced her own mortality, had built in a failsafe, a clause, a rule, as she had called it. "And so, my dearest Arthur," she wrote, "I leave the final disbursement of this trust to your discretion. The principal sum is to be transferred to our beloved Emily upon the occasion of her marriage. However, this transfer is subject to one non-negotiable condition. The marriage must be officially sanctified in a ceremony at which you, her father, are not only present, but at which you have also personally given the bride away. This clause is ironclad. Mr. Gable has assured me of its legal solidity. It is my way of ensuring that whoever marries our daughter is worthy of her, that he honors her family, and most importantly, that he honors you, the greatest man I have ever known. If this condition is not met, the entire principle of the trust is to be immediately and irrevocably donated to the list of charities appended herein. I let the letter fall into my lap. The attic was cold, but a fire was roaring to life inside me. They hadn't just slighted me. They hadn't just stolen a wedding or a sum of money. Blinded by their greed, in their arrogant rush to cut me out and seize what they believed was theirs, they had made a multi-million-dollar mistake. They thought they had played me for a fool, but they had just handed me the hammer. And I, Arthur Miller, a man who had spent his life building things, was about to engage in a bit of demolition. The first phone call I made was to Mr. Howard Gable of Gable & Croft. His voice was exactly as I'd imagined from his firm's name, old, dry as parchment, and utterly uncompromising. He remembered Clara fondly and expressed his condolences for my loss, even a decade late. "I have the portfolio, Mr. Gable," I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. "And I have read the clause, the condition." "Ah, yes," he rasped. "The father's clause, as we called it. Your wife was a very shrewd woman, Mr. Miller. She loved you a great deal. She wanted to ensure her daughter married a man who respected her roots, not just her portfolio. Has there been a development?" I explained everything. The secret wedding, the courthouse, my exclusion, his parents being the only witnesses. The silence on the other end of the line was long and profound. I could almost hear the gears of a brilliant legal mind turning. "Mr. Miller," he finally said, and there was a new note of respect, almost of relish in his voice. "They have made a catastrophic error in judgment. The clause is, as your wife wrote, ironclad. We had it vetted against every possible challenge at the time of its creation. Do you have proof of this marriage ceremony? A date? A location?" "I have the groom's own word," I said, "but I think I can get something better." That's when the plan began to form in my mind. Not a passionate, angry outburst, but a cold, calculated strategy. A structure built of their own greed. The Vances saw me as a sentimental old fool, a relic to be managed and discarded. I would use that perception as my greatest weapon. I waited a week of pure agony where I had to feign a broken silence. I let their texts and voicemails, which had now started, feigning concern, go unanswered. "Arthur, we're worried about you." "Dad, please just call me back. We need to sort out the fund." They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the money, my $100,000, the appetizer before what they believed would be the main course. Finally, I acted. I didn't call. I crafted an email, making it sound like it was written by a man who was defeated, heartbroken, and utterly resigned. Subject: For Emily, to Julian and Emily, I apologize for my silence. This has been difficult for me to process. I am an old man, set in my ways, and I reacted poorly. My generation puts too much stock in tradition, and I let that cloud my judgment. What's done is done. Your happiness is all that has ever mattered to me, Emily. I am coming to terms with the fact that my role in your life is changing. As such, I have been meeting with my own financial advisor to get my affairs in order. It is time for me to update my will and estate planning. I intend to make you, my only daughter, the sole beneficiary of what little I have left. For these legal documents, my advisor requires a copy of your official, state-issued marriage certificate. A simple formality, he says. If you could please scan and email a copy to me at your earliest convenience, it would be a great help in settling my estate. As for the wedding fund, please forgive my earlier stubbornness. You were right. It is your money for your future. Once my estate paperwork is updated, I will wire the full amount to you. Consider it my wedding gift. With love, Dad, Arthur Miller, I read it over a dozen times. Every word was a carefully chosen lure. Defeated. Resigned. My estate. Sole beneficiary. It was a symphony of submission, playing a tune I knew they would be desperate to hear. I was handing them the victory they thought they had already won, and in doing so, asking for the one thing I needed, the official, undeniable proof of their blunder, The signed confession. I hit send and felt a jolt, as if a line had been cast into dark, shark-infested waters. The response came in less than an hour. It was from Julian. Subject: Re. For Emily Arthur, thank you for your understanding. It means the world to both of us. We knew you'd come around. It was the sensible thing to do. Emily is ecstatic to hear you're being so proactive about your estate. It's wise planning. Attached, you will find a scanned copy of our marriage certificate as requested. You'll see the date of the ceremony, the location, City Hall, and the witnesses listed. My parents, of course. Please let us know when we can expect the wire transfer of the fund. We have our eyes on a beautiful property in the Oak Ridge district and are eager to make an offer. All the best, Julian Vance. I clicked open the attachment, and there it was, in crisp black and white. A legal document from the state registrar. The names Julian Vance and Emily Miller. The date, the day before my phone call. And at the bottom, under the witness signatures, Richard Vance and Eleanor Vance. I printed it out, the paper warm from the machine. I held it in my hands, this simple sheet of paper that was simultaneously a declaration of their marriage and the death warrant of their aspirations. They had taken the bait. They had swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. They had been so blinded by their impending victory, so sure of my capitulation, that they hadn't stopped for a single second to ask themselves why the defeated old man needed that specific document so urgently. They saw a check for $100,000 and the promise of a future inheritance. They didn't see the trap closing around them. I forwarded the email from Julian, complete with the attached certificate, to Mr. Gable with a simple message. We have it. His reply was even simpler, and it sent a chill of cold, sweet vindication down my spine. The board is set, Mr. Miller. Now we choose our moment to say, checkmate. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in masterful patience. I transferred the $100,000 to Julian's account, just as I'd promised. I even included a note in the wire description, with all my love for your future. The cost of the ticket to the final performance was steep, but the show would be priceless. The money, as expected, lit a fire under them. Emily called me, her voice bubbly and bright for the first time since the wedding. It was a practiced, artificial cheerfulness that made my stomach turn. Dad, oh, thank you, she gushed. The money came through. We've already put in an offer on a gorgeous house. It has a little room in the back that you could turn into a workshop when you visit. The casual, thoughtless cruelty of it, offering me a pale imitation of the sanctuary they had violated, was breathtaking. I played my part. That sounds wonderful, honey. I'm so happy for you both. Julian and the Vances were equally emboldened. Their communication became frequent and proprietary. They sent me links to the house listing. They discussed renovations. They treated me like a doddering but useful old relative who had finally seen reason and opened his wallet. They had no idea that with every cheerful, condescending email, they were simply tightening the noose around their own necks. Meanwhile, Mr. Gable and I were preparing. He moved with the quiet, deliberate efficiency of a man who had dismantled giants before. He contacted the trustees of Clara's estate and the designated charities, placing them on standby. He prepared a full, detailed accounting of the trust, every stock, every bond, every piece of real estate, a portfolio of dreams they would never realize. The final piece of the plan was the setting. This couldn't be a confrontation in a living room or a bitter phone call. It needed a stage. It needed gravitas. It needed to be on my terms, in a place where their wealth and influence meant nothing, and the law meant everything. Mr. Gable's office, after confirming the Vances had officially closed on their new, expensive house, using my $100,000 for the down payment and leveraging themselves to the hilt based on their anticipated inheritance, we sent the invitation. It was printed on thick, creamy cardstock from Gable and Croft's letterhead, the kind of paper that felt important before you even read the words. It was delivered by a professional courier. It read, "You are cordially invited to a meeting regarding the estate of the late Clara Miller. The purpose of this meeting is the formal reading of Mrs. Miller's final will and testament, and the execution of the primary disbursement of the Miller Family Trust to its designated beneficiary. Your presence is required to finalize the transfer of assets. Date, Friday, October 24th. Time, 2 p.m. sharp. Location, the offices of Gable and Croft, 1800 Financial Plaza, Suite 4500. I sent a separate personal note to Emily. "Em, this is it. The final settling of your mother's affairs. It's a big day for you. I'm so proud. I'll see you there." The trap was now fully built, baited, and set. All that was left was for the prey to walk into it. Julian called me almost immediately, his voice practically vibrating with excitement. "Arthur, we received the invitation from your lawyer. This is it, isn't it? The main event." "It's the reading of Clara's will, Julian," I said, keeping my voice level and calm. "It's what she wanted." Of course, a formality. Richard and Eleanor will be there as well, as my family representatives. We're all so excited for Emily. She deserves this." He said it as if he were the magnanimous benefactor, bestowing this fortune upon my daughter himself. The day of the meeting, I woke up with a strange sense of peace. I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to Clara's funeral. It felt right somehow, a closing of a circle. I stopped at the cemetery on the way downtown. I laid a hand on the cool granite of her headstone. "You were right, Clara," I whispered to the wind. "You always knew. I'm just seeing it through. For you, for the daughter we raised, not the woman she's become. I hope she's still in there somewhere." I arrived at Gable and Croft's offices 15 minutes early. The suite was on the top floor of the tallest building in the city. The view was panoramic, a God's eye perspective of the world below. The office itself was a sanctuary of old wood, leather-bound books, and quiet dignity. It smelled of history and power. Mr. Gable greeted me with a firm handshake. "Everything is in place, Arthur. The representatives from the charities are waiting in the adjacent conference room. They are aware of the situation. And the Vances? They called this morning to confirm their attendance. All 4 of them." He gave me a thin, wintry smile. They sounded eager. I sat in the mahogany-paneled boardroom, looking out over the city. I was just a simple carpenter, a man of sawdust and sweat. I was about to face off against a family of wealth, privilege, and ruthless ambition. But I wasn't afraid, because I had a blueprint they had never seen, and I was armed with a truth as hard and unforgiving as steel. At exactly 2 p.m., the boardroom door opened. The Vances walked in, followed by my daughter. They were dressed to the nines, Julian and Richard in tailored suits, Eleanor in a sharp designer dress, and Emily in a tasteful silk blouse. They looked like royalty arriving to claim their kingdom. Their faces were alight with anticipation and greed. They saw me sitting at the head of the long table, and their smiles became triumphant. They thought I was here to witness their victory. They had no idea they had just walked into their own execution. "Arthur, so good of you to come," Richard Vance boomed, extending a hand I did not take. He wasn't fazed, simply retracting it and taking a seat as if he owned the room. Eleanor, Julian, and Emily sat down opposite me. Emily gave me a small, nervous smile, which I met with a blank, unreadable expression. Julian was practically preening, adjusting his tie and shooting his cuffs. He caught my eye and gave me a condescending wink, a silent acknowledgement of his total victory. Mr. Gable entered the room carrying a heavy leather-bound portfolio, the one from my attic. He sat at the other end of the table, placing the portfolio squarely in the center. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere. His aura of stern, unassailable authority silenced their cheerful chatter. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice filling the room. "I am Howard Gable, legal counsel for the estate of the late Clara Miller. We are here today to execute the terms of her final will in the Associated Family Trust. As per the legal requirements, I will now read the relevant sections aloud." He put on a pair of spectacles and opened the portfolio. The Vances leaned forward, their eyes gleaming. "I, Clara Miller, being of sound mind and body," Mr. Gable began, reading through the standard legal preamble. He then moved to the disposition of her personal effects, which were few. Then he came to the trust. "Regarding the Miller Family Trust, account number 74B311, the entirety of the principal and all accrued interest is to be dispersed to my sole surviving issue, my daughter, Emily Miller." A collective satisfied sigh went through the Vance family. Julian reached over and squeezed Emily's hand. She looked relieved as if a great weight had been lifted. However, Mr. Gable continued, his voice dropping slightly, the disbursement is contingent upon the fulfillment of a specific, legally binding condition. This is outlined in Addendum C, which I will now read. He turned a page. The Vance's expressions shifted from triumph to mild confusion. This was an unexpected delay on their path to riches. Mr. Gable cleared his throat. Addendum C, the father's clause. The transfer of the trust's assets to my daughter, Emily Miller, is conditional upon her legal marriage. This marriage must be sanctified in a ceremony at which her father, Arthur Miller, is physically present. Furthermore, his presence must be for the explicit purpose of formally giving his daughter, the bride, away to her husband. His participation in this specific role is a prerequisite for the execution of the trust. It must be a role he accepts willingly and performs publicly during the wedding ceremony. Silence. A thick, heavy silence descended on the room. Julian's smile had vanished, replaced by a tight, confused frown. "What is this?" Richard Vance demanded. "Some kind of sentimental nonsense? The wedding already happened. We are married." He gestured between Julian and Emily. "Indeed," Mr. Gable said calmly. He reached into his own briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper, placing it on the table. It was the copy of the marriage certificate I had printed. This is the official record of the marriage between Julian Vance and Emily Miller. It states the ceremony took place on September 25th at City Hall. He then looked directly at me. "Arthur Miller, were you present at this ceremony?" All eyes turned to me. I let the silence stretch for a long, painful moment before answering, my voice clear and strong. "No, I was not." "Were you invited to this ceremony?" Mr. Gable asked. "No," I said. "I was not." "Did you at any point publicly or privately give your daughter away to Mr. Vance?" "No," I said. "I did not." A wave of panic began to ripple across the faces of the Vance family. "This is ridiculous," Eleanor snapped, her voice high and shrill. "It's a minor technicality. The spirit of the request was fulfilled. They are married." "Madam," Mr. Gable said, his tone like ice, "the law does not deal in spirit, it deals in execution. This clause was specifically designed to be airtight. Your son and daughter-in-law, by deliberately excluding Mr. Miller from their wedding, have failed to meet the one and only condition for the disbursement of the trust." Julian shot to his feet, his face turning a blotchy red. "You can't be serious. This is a trick. He tricked us." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "That email, asking for the certificate for his estate, it was a setup. It was a request for a legal document which you freely provided," Mr. Gable countered without missing a beat. "A document which serves as irrefutable proof that the conditions of the will were not met." Emily was chalk white, staring at me, her mouth slightly agape. The realization of what had happened was dawning on her, and it was a horrifying sunrise. "So what does this mean?" Richard asked, his voice a low growl. "The funds are delayed?" "No," Mr. Gable said. He turned another page in the portfolio. "It means we now move to the final instruction in the addendum. In the event that the primary condition for disbursement is not met at the time of my daughter's first legal marriage, the trust is to be immediately dissolved. The entirety of the principal and all accrued interest are to be donated in equal parts to the charitable organizations listed in Appendix A." He paused, looking over his spectacles at the four frozen faces. "As of this moment, per the legally binding instructions of Clara Miller's will, the Miller Family Trust no longer has Emily Miller as its beneficiary. The total sum, which as of this morning's accounting is $9,428,611.42, will be transferred to the Children's Hospital Foundation and the National Canine Rescue League." The sound Eleanor made was a strangled gasp. Richard looked like he'd been punched in the gut, but it was Julian who truly lost control. "No!" he screamed, slamming his fist on the polished mahogany table. "That's our money, you old bastard!" He shrieked at me, his handsome face contorted into a mask of pure rage. "You did this! You planned this! You let us buy the house! You let us move forward!" "I did nothing," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I gave you the $100,000 you demanded, My entire life savings as a wedding gift. Everything that has happened with Clara's trust, you did to yourselves. Your greed, your disrespect, your arrogance. This is the price. You didn't just want a wedding without me. You wanted a future without me. Well, now you have it. Emily finally broke. Sobs tore from her chest as she stared at her new husband, seeing, perhaps for the first time, the monster beneath the charming facade. You knew, she whispered, her voice trembling with dawning horror. You must have known about the trust. You pushed me to do this. You told me Dad was trying to control us with his silly wedding plans. Shut up, you idiot, Julian snarled at her, his mask completely gone. If you hadn't been so weak, if you'd handled your father properly from the start, we wouldn't be in this mess. Mr. Gable stood up. I believe this meeting is concluded, he said crisply. Security will show you out. The Vances were a broken, bickering mess as they were escorted from the room, their world shattered. Richard was pale, Eleanor was weeping hysterically, and Julian was still shouting threats and accusations. Emily was the last to leave. She paused at the door, her face a ruin of tears and shame. She looked at me, her eyes begging for something. Forgiveness, an explanation, a reversal of time. I just looked back at her, the immense weight of my love for her warring with the profound depth of her betrayal. I said nothing. The silence was my answer. She turned and fled, leaving me alone in the quiet, empty boardroom, with the ghost of my wife and the echo of a fortune won and lost. The checkmate had been delivered, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic, a financial demolition that left nothing but rubble. The Vances, as it turned out, were not just wealthy, they were leveraged to the absolute limit. They lived a life of perceived riches built on a mountain of debt. They had been counting on the Miller Trust as their grand bailout, their ticket to true solvency. Richard had apparently made a series of disastrous investments, and Julian's financial advising was more about maintaining appearances than generating actual wealth. The new house they had bought, a symbol of their triumph, became an anchor that dragged them under. They couldn't afford the mortgage payments without the inheritance. Within 2 months, the bank foreclosed. The beautiful property in Oak Ridge went back on the market. Their deposit, my $100,000, lost forever. The news came to me in snippets from acquaintances. The Vances had to sell their big house, their cars. Julian's firm, upon hearing rumors of the debacle and his fraudulent expectations, launched an internal investigation into his practices and summarily fired him. His clients, it seemed, were not as well managed as he led them to believe. Stripped of his money and status, his charming veneer cracked for good. The marriage, a business transaction from the start, dissolved once the assets were liquidated. Julian, in a final act of spite, blamed Emily for everything. He called her naive, a disappointment, and walked away without a backward glance, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the crushing weight of her choices. About 3 months after the meeting in Mr. Gable's office, my doorbell rang. It was a cold, rainy evening. I opened the door to find Emily standing on my porch, drenched and shivering, looking thin and lost. She was no longer the polished woman who had walked into that boardroom. She looked like the little girl who used to run to me when she fell and scraped her knee. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with a galaxy of shame and regret, and burst into tears. It wasn't the practiced, manipulative sorrow of before. This was the raw, soul-deep grief of someone who has lost everything, especially themselves. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in the living room for a long time, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock I'd built for Clara years ago. She finally told me everything. Julian had found out about the trust through a financial contact who had once managed a small part of her grandfather's portfolio. He didn't know the details of the clause, only that there was a massive inheritance tied to her marriage. He had orchestrated the entire campaign against me, convincing Emily that I was a controlling old man trying to relive my own life through her wedding. He'd told her that if they didn't take control, I would hold the money over their heads forever. He'd preyed on her insecurities, her desire to please his sophisticated family, and her fear of conflict. She had allowed herself to believe him because it was easier than standing up to him. She had chosen the path of least resistance and found it led off a cliff. "He never loved me, Dad," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "He just loved an account number he thought was attached to me, and I let him turn me against the only person who ever truly loved me. You." Forgiveness isn't a switch you can flip. It's a slow, painstaking process, like restoring a piece of furniture that's been left out in the rain. The wood is warped, the joints are loose, the finish is ruined. You can't just slap on a new coat of varnish. You have to strip it down to the bare wood, sand away the imperfections, and rebuild it, piece by piece. That's what we started to do. Emily moved back into her childhood bedroom. The first few weeks were painfully awkward. She helped around the house, cooking meals we often ate in silence. She got a simple job at a local bookstore, her fancy degree meaning little without the Vance name to back it up. She was humbled. She was broken. One day I went into the workshop. The splintered pieces of the rocking horse were still in the corner where I'd left them. I started to sweep them up, to throw them away. "Wait," Emily said from the doorway. She walked in, her eyes on the pile of broken wood. Can we fix it?" I looked at her, then at the wreckage. "It'll never be perfect, Em. The cracks will always be there. You'll always be able to see where it was broken." "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes again. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's a reminder." And so we began to rebuild. Together in the quiet of the workshop, surrounded by the scent of cedar and sawdust, we started putting the pieces back together. We worked with wood glue and clamps, sanding the jagged edges until they were smooth, if not seamless. It was slow, meticulous work. We didn't talk much about the past. We talked about the task at hand, about the grain of the wood, the set of a joint, the art of making something whole again. The millions of dollars were gone, donated to sick children and homeless dogs. Clara's money had done a world of good, just not in the way any of us had expected. The Vances had vanished, disgraced footnotes in our life story. All the drama, the anger, the revenge, it had faded, leaving behind only this quiet, difficult reality. The rocking horse stands in my living room now. You can see the fine lines where the wood was shattered, a roadmap of its own destruction and repair. It's not the flawless gift I once envisioned for a hypothetical grandchild. It's something more. It's a testament to the fact that things can be broken, trust, hearts, families. But that doesn't always have to be the end of the story. Sometimes the hardest work isn't in the initial building. It's in the patient, painful, and loving act of reconstruction. It's not a fairy tale ending, but it's a real one. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like I'm building something that will truly last. In the end, the Vances didn't understand one simple thing that every craftsman knows. True value isn't about what something costs. It's about what went into making it. They saw $100,000 and they saw millions more. They never saw the 30 years of sacrifice, the love, and the promise that was the real inheritance. They built their lives on a foundation of greed. And like any poorly built house, it was destined to collapse. My story isn't just about revenge. It's about the karma that finds those who disrespect the foundations of family, honor, and love. It's a reminder that true wealth is the legacy you build in people's hearts, not their bank accounts. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of integrity and that karma sooner or later settles all debts, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories about life, loss, and the lessons we learn along the way, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss what's next. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening.